It was not a normal evening for Henry. As he was heading home after work, he saw something strange near his fields. A very weak, almost dead horse. The poor thing was lying on the ground, barely moving. Henry's heart sank. He walked over to the horse, and, to his surprise, it was still alive. Gently, he spoke to it. "Hang in there, little one. I'll help you." Henry carefully lifted the horse and took it back to his barn, determined to care for it, not knowing this small act of kindness would change everything. Days passed, and the horse grew stronger. It became the proudest of Henry's animals, loyal and brave. Then one day the horse humiliated the county's billionaire, Richard, when he disrespected Henry. The horse stood tall, refusing to back down. What started as a simple act of kindness soon became a story that left everyone speechless. In a small, run-down house on the edge of the field lived a 60-year-old farmer named Henry. Life hadn't been kind to him, but he never let it harden his heart. His days were simple: tilling the land, tending to his crops, and staring at the empty chair in his kitchen, the one his late wife used to sit in. The silence of his home was deafening, yet Henry carried on, his kindness unshaken by the weight of loneliness. On this particular day, Henry was working in the field, his shovel cutting through the stubborn soil. Sweat trickled down his wrinkled face as he paused to catch his breath. That's when he saw it, a lifeless shape lying far out in the distance. At first, he thought it was a rock, but as he squinted, realization dawned. It was a horse. Curiosity and concern tugged at Henry's heart. Leaving his work behind, he trudged toward the creature, his boots crunching on the dry ground. As he got closer, his breath caught in his throat. The horse was in a pitiful state, weak, battered, and barely alive. Its eyes, dull and defeated, flickered open for a moment and locked with Henry's. Something about those weak eyes seemed to whisper, "Help me." Henry knelt beside the horse, his hands trembling as he inspected its wounds. His heart ached at the sight, but his mind hesitated. Helping this horse would be no small task. It would take time, money, things he barely had. Yet, as he stood there, the farmer couldn't bring himself to walk away. Would you help an almost dead horse if it meant sacrificing your own comfort? Henry sighed deeply, his decision made. "All right, buddy," he said softly. "I don't know how we'll manage, but I'll give you a chance. You deserve that much." With great effort, he gathered the frail animal and began the slow walk back to his home, a spark of hope lighting the dark path ahead. Little did Henry know, this decision would change his life forever. Henry's small home wasn't much. A creaky wooden shack with peeling paint and a roof that leaked on rainy nights. But it was the only safe haven he could offer Robbin, as D. He carefully laid the horse down on a patch of straw in the corner of his barn. Doubt began to creep in. The animal's labored breathing and lifeless frame made Henry wonder if it was already too late. Yet every time Robbin opened his tired eyes, Henry saw something, a flicker of will, a faint fight to stay alive. "You've got some fire in you," Henry whispered. "We'll make it through this, together." But helping Robbin wasn't simple. The old farmer barely earned enough to feed himself, let alone care for an injured horse. The vet bills were steep, and the special feed Robbin needed was out of reach. Henry sat by his kitchen table late into the night, staring at the small map of his land. There was only one option left. The next morning, Henry trudged into town with a heavy heart. He met with a buyer and sold a portion of his field, the same field that had kept him alive for decades. The few coins in his hand felt like a cruel reminder of his struggle, yet he smiled as he used them to pay for Robbin's treatment. Day by day, Henry tended to the horse, cleaning his wounds, feeding him with care, and talking to him as if Robbin could understand every word. "You're part of my family now," he said, gently stroking the horse's matted mane. But a lingering question loomed over Henry's mind. Would Robbin even survive after all the farmer's sacrifices? Weeks passed, and there were small signs of progress. Robbin stood for a moment, wobbly but determined. His eyes grew brighter, his coat glossier, and his once feeble neigh grew stronger. For the first time in years, Henry felt hope stir in his chest. Little did he know, the bond he was forming with Robbin would soon face a test neither of them could foresee. The days turned into weeks, as Robbin slowly began his journey to recovery. Under Henry's constant care, the horse's wounds began to heal. Each day, Henry massaged Robbin's injured leg, cleaned his cuts, and fed him with what little he could spare. Slowly but surely, Robbin's frail frame began to regain its strength. His coat started to shine, and his eyes no longer looked defeated. They carried a spark of life. One crisp morning, Henry walked into the barn to check on Robbin. As he approached, Robbin lifted his head and let out a soft, shaky neigh. Henry froze for a moment, his heart swelling with emotion. It was the first sound Robbin had made since he found him in the field. Henry chuckled, wiping a tear from his eye. "That's my boy," he said, patting Robbin's neck. "You're tougher than you look." Their bond grew deeper with each passing day. Robbin seemed to understand Henry's words, and Henry found comfort in the horse's silent companionship. For the first time in years, the old farmer didn't feel so alone. One afternoon, as Henry was feeding Robbin, the familiar sound of footsteps approached. It was his old friend, Sam, a lively man with a knack for bold ideas. Sam looked at Robbin, impressed by the horse's transformation. "Well, Henry," he said with a grin, "you've got yourself a miracle on 4 legs here." Henry chuckled. He's come a long way, hasn't he? But then Sam's grin turned into a mischievous smirk. "You know," he began, "there's a big horse race in the city coming up. The prize money could change your life. Why don't you enter, Robbin? Let's see if this miracle can go the distance." Henry blinked in disbelief. "A race? Sam, have you seen the horses that run in those? They're trained, they're fed the best money can buy. Robbin's just—" He hesitated, looking at the horse. Sam leaned in, his voice low and persuasive. "He's not just anything, Henry. Look at him. He's got heart. That's worth more than anything money can buy." Henry stared at Robbin, his mind swirling with doubt and possibility. Could this be their chance to turn things around, or was it just a foolish dream? The air was thick with suspense as Henry rubbed his chin, weighing the risks and rewards. Was Robbin ready for such a challenge? And even if he was, could they really compete with the city's finest? Unknowingly, a new chapter in their story was about to begin. Henry sat on his creaky porch that evening, staring out at the horizon. Robbin grazed peacefully in the distance, his movements steady and strong. Sam's suggestion echoed in his mind like a stubborn tune he couldn't shake. "Race," Henry muttered to himself, shaking his head. "How could a horse that was once dying compete against the best in the city? Those horses are built like machines, trained, polished, and worth more than my entire field." Later that night, Sam dropped by again, his voice brimming with excitement. "Henry, you're overthinking this," he said, leaning forward. "Robbin's no ordinary horse. He's got something they don't, heart. He owes you this, old friend. Let him pay you back for what you've done." Henry sighed, running his calloused fingers through his gray hair. "Sam, it's not about what he owes me. I just don't know if he's ready. What if we fail? What if he gets hurt again?" Sam chuckled and clapped Henry on the shoulder. "You've already brought him back from the brink of death. That horse is alive today because of you. Don't you think he'd do anything to give you a fighting chance?" Henry glanced at Robbin through the barn window. The horse stood tall now, his coat gleaming in the moonlight. Robbin seemed to sense Henry's gaze and let out a strong, confident neigh. It was as if he was saying, "Trust me." Henry's chest tightened with emotion. The idea was terrifying, yet thrilling. A chance at the race could mean a better life, but it could also mean failure, humiliation, or worse. The night grew quiet, but the question refused to leave his mind. Would he take this leap? Of faith? Henry finally whispered into the stillness. What do you think, Robbin? Are we ready for this? As if in reply, Robbin stomped his hoof and neighed again, louder this time. A flicker of determination crossed Henry's face. Maybe, just maybe, they were. But could a farmer and a once-dying horse truly stand against the city's elite? Only time would tell. The sun rose over the small farm each day, casting its golden light on an unlikely duo preparing for the race of their lives. Henry and Robbin began their 1-month training, relying on nothing but grit and determination. With no fancy equipment or professional trainers, Henry improvised. He crafted hurdles from old wooden planks and used the open fields as their track. Each morning, Henry called out, "Come on, Robbin, let's show them what you're made of." Robbin responded with a determined neigh, his hooves pounding the dirt as if he already knew he carried more than just himself. He carried the farmer's hopes. Despite his aching back, Henry refused to slow down. He'd run alongside Robbin, cheering him on. When the horse grew tired, Henry would stroke his mane and say, "You can do this, my boy. I believe in you." In the evenings, their bond grew deeper. Henry would sit under the stars, feeding Robbin, carrots and fresh grass from his fields. "You've given me something to live for again," he whispered one night, his voice thick with emotion. Robbin nudged him gently, as if to say, "And I won't let you down." But not everything was smooth sailing. The grueling training took a toll on both of them. Robbin stumbled over hurdles, his injured leg showing signs of weakness. Henry's face grew lined with worry as he wondered, was this all too much? Too soon? As the final week approached, whispers of doubt crept into Henry's mind. "We've come so far, but is it enough?" he muttered, watching Robbin rest after a long day. And yet, despite the limited resources and endless challenges, something about Robbin's unyielding spirit kept Henry going. But deep down, the question lingered. Could all this effort ever measure up against the billionaire's prized horses? The stage was set, and while they had grown stronger together, the stakes loomed larger than ever. Would their bond and determination be enough to triumph over the odds? The city racetrack buzzed with energy. Bright banners flapped in the wind. Vendors shouted over the crowd, and cameras flashed as elegantly dressed spectators arrived in droves. The air was thick with the scent of fresh hay and excitement, blending with the metallic tang of competition. Everywhere Henry looked, he saw wealth. Owners in tailored suits patted their pristine, muscular horses, each adorned with shimmering saddles and custom bridles. Their trainers barked last-minute instructions, and the polished shoes of jockeys glinted in the sun. Then there was Henry and Robbin. The old man, dressed in his simple overalls and worn boots, guided Robbin through the bustling paddock. Robbin's coat gleamed with health, but his modest bridle and the lack of a flashy entourage made him and Henry stick out like a sore thumb. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Who's that old guy?" one person asked. "Looks like he wandered in from a farm." Another chuckled. "That horse doesn't stand a chance against Storm King or Thunderbolt." Henry ignored the murmurs, focusing on Robbin. He gently patted the horse's neck. "Don't mind them, boy. Let's show them what the heart can do." Robbin neighed softly, his ears twitching as if he understood. The lineup was announced, and the competing horses were led to the track. Each horse looked like a creature carved from legend. Massive muscles, perfect symmetry, and an aura of dominance. Robbin, though smaller and humbler in appearance, held his head high. As Henry stood on the sidelines, a pit of doubt formed in his stomach. Could they really do this? Had he asked too much of Robbin? The crowd's laughter and disbelief only made it worse. But then, Robbin pawed the ground and snorted loudly, his eyes blazing with determination. Henry took a deep breath. He's ready, he thought. As the starting bell approached, the tension in the air grew electric. The crowd leaned forward, eyes glued to the track. "Do you think Robbin can even compete with these powerful horses?" The announcer's voice boomed, stirring the suspense. The gates rattled, ready to burst open as the moment of truth arrived. Could a farmer and his underdog horse shock the world? The starting bell rang, and the gates flew open with a thunderous roar. The majestic horses bolted forward, their powerful legs churning up clouds of dust. Robbin hesitated for a split second, thrown off by the deafening cheers and flashing lights. The crowd erupted into laughter. "Look at that poor horse," someone jeered. "He can barely keep up." Henry's heart sank as Robbin struggled to find his rhythm. For the first few strides, Robbin trailed at the back of the pack, his smaller frame dwarfed by the towering horses ahead. The lead horse, Storm King, powered forward effortlessly, pulling away from the others. But then something shifted. Robbin's ears twitched, and his eyes narrowed with determination. With a fierce snort, he began to pick up speed, his hooves striking the ground like thunder. "He's gaining ground!" gasped a spectator. One by one, Robbin overtook the weaker competitors, weaving through the pack with surprising agility. The laughter turned to murmurs of disbelief. "Is that the farm horse?" someone whispered. "How is he moving like that?" Henry watched. From the sidelines, gripping the fence so tightly, his knuckles turned white. "Come on, Robbin," he muttered under his breath. "You can do this." As the race entered its final stretch, the stakes couldn't have been higher. Storm King remained far ahead, his polished coat glinting in the sunlight. But Robbin had climbed to third place, his every stride powered by sheer determination. The crowd leaned forward, their cheers now mixed with gasps. Robbin surged forward, overtaking the second-place horse in a burst of speed that left even the announcer stunned. And out of nowhere, "Robbin takes second place," the announcer exclaimed. The finish line loomed closer, the gap between Robbin and Storm King shrinking with every second. But with one final burst of energy, Storm King crossed, the finish line just ahead, securing first place. Robbin thundered moments later, claiming second. The stadium fell silent for a heartbeat and then erupted in applause and shock. How did that farm horse do it? Who is this old man and his underdog? Henry's eyes filled with tears as he ran to meet Robbin at the track. He wrapped his arms around the horse's neck, his voice trembling with pride. "You did it, boy. You showed them." Robbin, once a dying wild horse, had defied every expectation. Against all odds, he finished second in a race dominated by champions, leaving the world in awe. The dust had barely settled when the race officials rushed over, handing Henry a large check, $10 million, an amount he never imagined would fall into his hands. The crowd cheered wildly as the once unknown farmer became an instant sensation. "Unbelievable!" shouted an excited reporter. "This farmer and his wild horse just turned the horse racing world upside down." But despite the whirlwind of attention and the overwhelming praise, Henry's mind was focused only on one thing: Robbin. The horse had earned this moment, not him. As they made their way off the track, Henry couldn't stop patting Robbin's neck, whispering in his ear, "We did it, boy. You're the hero here." Just then, a sleek black limousine pulled up beside them, and a tall, imposing man stepped out. His expensive suit and polished shoes gleamed in the sunlight. His eyes immediately locked onto Robbin, and a smile crossed his lips. "Well, well," the billionaire said, his voice smooth and confident. "That was an impressive performance, my friend." He turned to Henry, offering a handshake. "I'm Richard Green. I've been in this business for decades, and I know talent when I see it. That horse of yours, Robbin, was it? He's something special." Henry hesitated, but took the handshake, nodding. "He's my boy," he said simply, his gaze never leaving Robbin. Richard's eyes twinkled with interest. "You're a man of few words, but you've certainly made an impression today." How would you like to take the money and let me take Robbin off your hands? I can offer you a fortune for him. You'll never have to worry about another thing in your life. Think about it. Robbin would have the finest stables, the best trainers. You'd be set for life." The words hung in the air, tempting and alluring. Henry glanced at the large check in his hand, the life-changing money, and then at Robbin, who stood quietly beside him, his coat gleaming under the sun. A tense silence stretched on. The crowd around them buzzed with whispers. Some urged Henry to take the deal, others eyed the money greedily, but Henry shook his head slowly. "No, I'm sorry. Robbin's not for sale. He's more than just a horse to me. He's my friend." Richard's smile faltered for a moment, a flicker of frustration crossing his face. "Are you sure?" he pressed, his tone turning a bit sharper. "You're a poor man. $10 million, plus whatever I would pay you for Robbin, is more than you could ever dream of." Henry met his gaze with unwavering resolve. "Money doesn't mean much when you've got something real. Robbin saved my life. I'm not selling him." The billionaire's expression darkened, but he quickly masked it with a forced grin. "You're making a mistake. You'll regret this." With a final glance at Henry, Richard turned to walk back to his car, but Robbin had other plans. Without warning, the horse let out a powerful neigh and took a few steps forward, kicking the dirt up. With a sudden, swift movement, Robbin lashed out, his hooves just missing the billionaire's shin. Richard staggered back, eyes wide, as Robbin snorted defiantly. "It's not just me you should be worried about," Henry said quietly, his voice firm and full of quiet pride. "You disrespected him, and he won't stand for it." The billionaire, visibly shaken by the horse's sudden defiance, nodded stiffly and hurried into his limousine. The door slammed shut, and the car sped off. Henry stood there, holding the check in his hands but feeling no real excitement over it. His eyes were on Robbin. The horse had protected him, not just with his speed but with his heart. And in that moment, Henry knew he had made the right decision. But the tension wasn't over. As the billionaire's limo disappeared down the road, a hush fell over the crowd. Everyone was watching now, waiting for what would come next. Would Henry's loyalty to Robbin be enough to carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead? Or had he just made an enemy that would stop at nothing to claim what he wanted? The stakes had just been raised, and the real journey was about to begin. The limousine had barely disappeared from view when the tension in the air shifted. The crowd stood silently, watching the moment unfold. Richard Green, the billionaire, had been humiliated. But he wasn't about to let that go without making a statement. With his back to the crowd, he turned and approached Henry again, his steps heavy with disdain. "You know, it's really quite sad," he sneered, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Here I am, offering you everything you could ever want in life, a future of luxury, money, and comfort, and yet you cling to your dirty little farm and this animal." He nodded toward Robbin, his words filled with scorn. "Do you really think you can win with this crippled beast? I should have known you were too naive to see the bigger picture." Henry didn't flinch. He stood firm, his eyes still on the horizon, but Robbin could feel the tension building. Richard scoffed, looking back at his luxury car as if already imagining the life of wealth and indulgence that awaited him. "You're a fool," he spat. "This horse doesn't belong here. You don't belong here. What are you really trying to prove, huh? A dying man playing hero to an injured horse." The crowd was silent, but the murmurs were starting again. Faint, barely audible, but growing. Richard's insults had cut deep, and Henry could feel the weight of every word. Yet, it wasn't just Henry who felt it. Robbin, standing tall beside him, seemed to sense the injustice. The horse's head snapped up, ears pinned forward as if he'd heard every word. Then, in an instant, Robbin moved. Without warning, the horse lunged forward with a powerful kick, sending a sharp thud through the air. The crowd gasped as Robbin's hooves hit the ground in a blur, and one of them connected with the billionaire's expensive suit, sending him tumbling backward. Richard's face twisted in shock and pain. He stumbled, his hands reaching for his stomach where Robbin's hoof had landed. "What? What is this?" he gasped, standing up slowly, his eyes wide with disbelief. "A horse? Challenged me?" Robbin snorted, his nostrils flaring with defiance. The horse, once weak and frail, was now a symbol of strength and loyalty, refusing to let anyone belittle his owner. The crowd, who had been unsure about the entire situation, now erupted into murmurs of awe and confusion. "Did this humble horse just challenge a billionaire?" someone whispered in the crowd, their voice tinged with disbelief. The question hung in the air, unanswered, as Richard tried to regain his composure, brushing himself off and glaring at Henry. "I've been in this business for decades, and no one has ever disrespected me like this." Richard's voice was low, menacing. He took a step toward Henry, his gaze filled with fury. Henry, still standing by Robbin, met his eyes with quiet resolve. "No one disrespects my friend," he said firmly, his voice steady and unwavering. "Not you, not anyone." The billionaire's expression darkened, but it was clear he was rethinking his approach. He realized for the first time that Robbin wasn't just a horse. He wasn't just a poor, injured animal to be mocked. He was something more. And maybe, just maybe, the billionaire wasn't as invincible as he thought. As Richard turned and stormed off toward his car, the crowd watched in silence. Robbin had spoken with more than just a kick. He'd shown the world that courage and loyalty could topple even the highest of powers. The billionaire's arrogance had been shattered in an instant, but what would happen next? Would Richard retaliate? Or had he learned something that day? One thing was certain, this was only the beginning of a much bigger story. The sun had barely set, casting a golden hue over the dusty racetrack as the last of the spectators drifted away, leaving only the sound of wind in the distance. Henry was leaning against a fence, Robbin grazing nearby, his coat glistening under the fading light. For a moment, everything seemed peaceful, until the sound of an approaching car shattered the calm. The sleek black sports car slowed to a stop just outside the racetrack gates. Richard Green, the billionaire who had tried to buy Robbin, stepped out, his expensive suit a sharp contrast against the simple surroundings of the farm. His face was filled with anger, but also something else, something deeper, a fire that refused to be extinguished. Henry looked up, his eyes narrowing, the memories of Richard's insults still fresh in his mind. Richard strode toward him, his demeanor cooler now, calculated. "You've made a fool of me," he said, his voice clipped. "But I'm not one to back down." He paused, letting the tension hang in the air. "I want a rematch. Right here, in the city. This time, I'll put everything on the line." Henry's heart skipped a beat. Richard's words hung in the air like a challenge, an invitation to a duel. His entire fortune, the billions he had spent a lifetime amassing, was at stake. "What do you say, Henry?" Richard's voice dropped, sharp, with intent. "Are you brave enough to risk it all?" The crowd, which had gathered around after hearing the car pull up, stood in hushed silence, watching the two men. The stakes were higher than ever before, and it was clear that this was no longer just about pride. This was a matter of trust, loyalty, and the future of the humble farmer against the vast fortune of a billionaire. Henry took a step back, his mind racing. The race would be different this time. Robbin was no longer the injured horse he had found that fateful day. He was strong, healthy, and had proven himself in the first race. But would it be enough? The billionaire had decades of experience in the world of racing. He had the best horses, the best equipment, and endless resources. Robbin, despite his Strength and determination was still just a wild horse raised by a humble farmer. Would they stand a chance? The crowd murmured, sensing the weight of the decision. Richard had already begun to speak again, as if he could already see the outcome. "If you win this time, Henry," he said with a sly grin, "I'll give you my entire fortune, my horses, my stables, my lands. But if I win—" He let the threat linger in the air, knowing full well that the farmer had nothing else to give. Suspense rippled through the crowd. The question was clear. Would Henry accept the challenge? Would he risk everything, including his bond with Robbin, for a chance at a fortune that could change his life forever? Henry's gaze moved to Robbin, who stood proudly beside him, his head held high, eyes sparkling with a silent promise. The bond between them was undeniable, but was that enough to take on a billionaire with everything to lose? The silence stretched. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows on the ground. Finally, Henry spoke, his voice steady but filled with quiet resolve. "You've got yourself a race, Richard," Henry said. "But this isn't about money or fortune for me. This is about loyalty and trust. I'll race for that." The challenge had been accepted. The stakes were higher than ever. Would the farmer and his wild horse, Robbin, emerge victorious once again? Or would the seasoned billionaire's wealth and experience prove too much to overcome? Only time would tell, and with that, the tension in the air grew thick as the countdown to the ultimate rematch began. Henry and Robbin stood in the field, the morning mist still hanging in the air. Robbin, once weak and wild, now ran with strength and purpose. Henry had trained him hard day after day, and the horse's speed and spirit grew. They were ready for the big race, but doubts lingered. The other horses were trained by experts, with perfect speed and strength. Could Robbin really compete? The race started, and Robbin lagged behind. But something changed. Robbin found a rhythm, pushing harder, closing the gap. As they neared the finish line, Robbin and the billionaire's horse were neck and neck. Could Robbin win, or was it too late? The crowd held their breath, waiting for the final moment. Just as the horses reached the finish line, the screen cut to black. Who will win? To be continued. Part 2.